Global Labor's humanitarian aid effort in Gaza to Canada's Radio Labour.
We're able to get a plane into Gaza to try and provide support, but our second convoy is about to go. Basically, we're trying to bring medical supplies, which are for the injured people in Gaza. Got a list of things here that are going on this convoy. Surgical operations table of medicines, just trying to provide some supplies, medical supplies to help. Those supplies are going to the Jordan Hazimite charity organisation, which is directly engaged in providing crisis relief and directly involved with the United Nations. And we're hoping, that will go directly to the people, the innocent civilians who are in need of that support. And we've been very lucky in the sense that our Jordanian office, which is our Arab World Office, headed by Bilal Maqawi, has been able to get the contributions are coming in are being doubled by the Jordanian connections. And so we're kind of getting double money for the process. And we've had great support from some of the other global union federations. UNI and IUF have already contributed. It's not normal for global union federations to directly contribute, but we've kind of started a new area of very, very close cooperation.
The ITF has condemned the Israeli airstrikes into Gaza as a disproportionate response that's daily killing civilians. ITF President Paddy Crumlin said that we strongly condemn the strikes by the Israeli military, which are being launched into one of the most densely populated areas in the world. We call for the urgent implementation of the UN Security Council's call for an immediate ceasefire. The ITF has a member union in Gaza, the Gaza Bus Drivers Union. The International Trade Union Confederation and Industrial Global Union are also responding in a global action campaign to lobby governments for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and humanitarian aid to civilians. The unions say targeting civilians is against international law, and they're calling for accountability and justice.
Workers Independent News puts workers and their unions on the national radio news airwaves every day. To help keep labor's voice on the air, go to laborradio.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to. Lots on the agenda. It's been took last week away, get some things in order. Lots of businessy stuff that I hate about doing this popped up, so I had to focus on that. Also took a couple of days off. Planned with family and to do that kind of stuff, but it is now back and in the saddle and ready to head towards Election Day, and numerous reasons continually popping up of why conservatism is a failure, why Republican ideology, why what they feed us constantly in the mainstream corporate-controlled media is so wrong. And you have to understand, who benefits. As always, who benefits? Who profits? Not you and me. And all of the stuff that we're seeing And if you look real close, there's stuff out there that point to you and I are getting screwed, and in the worst way. And all the while, the people who keep telling us about accountability and all that, not so much. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Also going to get into the vision for the country. Where do we go in the coming weeks, months, and years? And how do we get to that point? Going to take your thoughts, your questions, your comments. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call here at the studio, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. So how many people have been following the ghost employee or the ghost job that the governor handed out? I got to be honest, I was never a huge fan of the former education secretary, Ron Tamales. Never a big fan. I thought his ideas and what he was moving the state's education system towards was a failure, was a bad idea because of what he had done before. History tends to repeat itself. And then when he resigned and became, and you remember this on the program, us talking about this when it happened, and me raising the red flag going, hey, something amiss here. Corbett took his resignation and then hired him back almost at the same salary, about $140,000 a year, to be an education advisor. And I remember at the time going, wait a second, isn't that what the education secretary is supposed to be doing? Is it that, don't we have a cabinet position? Why do we need another one? Why do we need to double pay? And I remember going through this quite extensively when this whole thing happened. And it just lay dead for a while. People go, oh, well, the governor needs his advisors. Then a reporter said, hey, what's he doing? What's he actually doing? Because they asked some people who it is their job, the higher education stuff, of which he was supposed to be the special advisor. And nobody knew anything. Hadn't seen him, hadn't heard from him. So when one of the news agencies asked, hey, what's he done? Do you have any documentation? The news agency was handed 5 emails. That's what he's done in almost over a year. They asked for the phone logs, and the phone logs, maybe one phone call a day over a 12-month period. They handed out his calendar, his work calendar, and virtually nothing going on. In fact, according to the Patriot News, 20 weeks of this calendar, 20 weeks, there was nothing. There was darkness. There was blank. No work-related appointments. 20 weeks. How do I get a 20-week vacation? I feel bad taking a week off. When I need a day to do something, I feel horrible about taking a day. How do you take 20 weeks off? And I guess the truth of the matter is, work, really? Not all that important there. They also asked for his travel logs. And according to the Patriot News, the state hasn't been able to give any indication that he's done any traveling. Because had he done some traveling, what he was supposed to do is, and anybody who's ever worked for anyone where you get travel reimbursement, you have to submit reports, with receipts and mileage and tolls and all of that stuff so that you get your money back. There's not one of those. Now you can say, well, he could be a really good guy. He could be really special in that he was going to bear those costs himself. I don't buy it, but you could make that argument. Would you buy it? I mean, really, would you buy it? Because I don't. What I think it is this was a patronage job. We're going backwards, folks. All of the stuff that these people want to take us to, back to the good old days. Back to the day. Why do they want to destroy the public sector unions? Well, because they actually keep an eye on stuff. They're the ones who are actually going, we want qualified people in jobs. We don't want just patronage jobs. And this is just another of what we can come to expect in the future if the conservative ideology wins out. This is what we can come to expect as the months and years go down the road. More of these ghost jobs. more patronage jobs. Hey, political campaign jobs. Now, remember, I mean, and the irony is so thick. Remember, this is the great corruption slayer. Actually, not true. The great Democrat slayer. And he did a fantastic job of going after Democrats. Really, really did. Got to give credit where credit was due. And look, they deserved it. But the guy who was supposed to be the grand corruption kind of slayer guy, wow. If Rendell would have done something like this, I can envision hearing calls for not just impeachment or jail, but actually hang, drawn, and quartering, tar and feathering. I can't even imagine how far the conservative mind would have gone to go after Fast Eddie. Because he wasn't that stupid. This guy, oh my goodness. This guy flat out of his mind. He thinks you can have your campaign staff and your work staff in the same office in public because we're all working together, right? Isn't that what you went after? They also pointed out that the office that Mr. Tamales had as the special advisor didn't actually have a nameplate on his door until someone started going, hey, where is he? Maybe that's the Office of Waste, Fraud, and Abuse. Because I can't look at this and go, there's massive fraud going on here. And there absolutely needs to be an investigation immediately, if not sooner. And not just into this, into the whole cover-up and everything around it. Because according to the education secretary, the current one, who evidently is this ghost guy's job, it's his boss is this woman, Carolyn DeMarcus. That's the boss. Not knowing where the employee is, she said that. Now this was the original report. The original statement was, well, the reason there wasn't really an email trail, the reason the paper trail wasn't there, is that it's their policy to delete and to cleanse every day. You know, kind of like a emailoscopy, like a colonoscopy, or what's that, colostomy or whatever. Kind of like that, only with emails. We're just flushing them right out of the system. The only problem is that's kind of a violation of the law. Now, it's what I would do if I were in that position and I were doing something wrong. Because it's always amazing to me that people who know they're screwing up write it down. That people who know that they're breaking the law and know that they're violating something, they actually write it down, and someone keeps it. That it always blows my mind, especially in an era where we know. Because this, to me, we deleted and cleansed it. Well, here's the reality. I'm not dumb enough to believe that they're just gone. Because I do know that once you hit that delete button, it's somewhere. So now there should be an investigation into those comments. To me, this is a much bigger scandal. How much of what's going on in our state government is being done under the cloak of darkness? How much is being done in our state government that's being diverted from the public eye? Now remember, Jim Cawley in his press conference said, well, we weren't informing the public what we were doing. We were just doing our jobs. So to me, this is not just this one little $140,000 a year job. This is a huge systemic problem. This is massive. There is, in my view, there is massive waste, fraud, and abuse going on in the Corbett administration as we speak. And to me, these couple of things tie all that together. You know, what we've been talking about for a while, you can't get information out of this administration, nothing. Kind of like the Bush administration, very, very secretive. Oddly enough, run by some of the same people. So you ask yourself, you know, where does this go? Now, once people realize that what she said, that they delete and cleanse, love that, cleanse, that would kind of be against the law. One of the flacks came forth. Well, that's not what she was talking. She was talking about emails that weren't related to work. not related to policy or programs. And I'm going, but whoa. No. Those are state computers. I know, because I know a number of state workers who say that they don't take personal emails because those are part of the public record. Those can't be deleted. In fact, they're not deleted. They're somewhere. So my question then becomes, if they're somewhere, now, she's put it out there. The Corbett administration has put it out there that there was work being done. They just deleted it, or at least deleted emails, even personal emails. I want to know if he sent personal emails from his office as well. It would show that he went to work that day, right? Just a thought. So now you've got, finally people saying, hey, we need to be investigating this stuff. And I'm with you. There should be a special investigator assigned to this immediately. And if Corbett had any want of being reelected, because to me this is a massive election year issue. This should be the one issue that people go, wait a second, hold on. You were talking about accountability. You were talking about, I don't know, responsibility. Did I miss something? And the answer is no. Cawley's comment that they weren't telling people what they were doing, they were just doing what they wanted, is true. Cleansing information from we the people, I guarantee, is true. This is why we need to have an investigation, and why it has to happen right now. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Red roses too, I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. There's no proven cure for Ebola, but 2 American doctors did receive an experimental drug last week and were whisked out of West Africa. The drug appears to show some medical promise, but the efficacy of the treatment is far from established. Nevertheless, many are crying foul that Americans would receive a drug while aid workers tell patients they'll have to fight the disease on their own. So in an attempt to balance medical standards with calls to roll out an unproven drug, the World Health Organization is convening a panel of bioethicists next week to discuss how to proceed.
Many of the people in the regions of the world in sub-Saharan Africa who are at risk of the disease and have the disease have very low education. Many may be illiterate or semi-literate. And so to be able to explain to them that this is an experimental treatment that may kill you, it may not work, it may not do anything, is very difficult.
Robert Klitzman is the director of the master's program in bioethics at Columbia University.
I would argue we definitely have an obligation to educate people. Just because someone has only had a second-grade education doesn't mean we shouldn't give them treatment. That doesn't diminish their rights to treatment.
Another question is, who gets treated first?
Should we give it to the healthcare workers first? Arguably, I think that may make sense to do. Should we maybe give it to the younger people because they have longer to live? Or should we give it to the teachers or the socially most beneficial people in the society? Because we may not have a huge dose on day one, I personally think it may be prudent to first give it to some and see how it's effective and monitor the people carefully, not just give it out from a truck and then no one knows if they get better or not.
Sprinkle in colonial history or the tendency for medical treatments to be concentrated in only the wealthiest countries, and it's clear just how delicate next week's ethical debate will be. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Salvatore Calalori. This week marks the 40th anniversary of President Richard Nixon's resignation announcement in the wake of the Watergate scandal. For more than 5 years, conservative media figures have invoked Watergate in an attempt to amplify numerous scandals of the day involving President Obama. From Fox News co-host Eric Bolling,
I think Benghazi is a much bigger scandal than Watergate.
To Fox News contributor Brent Bozell,
I do believe that this IRS scandal is bigger than Watergate.
And Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee.
All the things aside from the Watergate cover-up, Nixon was a pretty effective president. It's really an insult to Richard Nixon to make the comparison.
Conservative media figures have compared at least 16 supposed scandals to Watergate, including Obamacare, President Obama's birth certificate, and Solyndra. But as the New York Times noted, Watergate involved, quote, wiretapping, money laundering, destruction of documents, payment of hush money, character assassination, disinformation, and deception, all perpetrated by people at the highest levels of government. For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
If the federal government continues to do the kinds of things that this administration is trying to do through the back door, through the National Labor Relations Board, that's killing our free market system.
We're running out of rich people in this country.
NLRB has become a political sycophant for labor unions.
And one of the things the Congress should do immediately is defund the National Labor Relations Board.
It seems to me that what we're seeing is a ceding of power from Congress to the NLRB and other agencies.
Really is a freedom versus tyranny issue.
I'm a member of the GOP, trying to form a plutocracy. But if I can just bamboozle you, and you'll share my narrow point of view, what a wonderful world this would be.
We can stay. Hey, look over here. Look at the shiny thing we've got over here. Look at this. It's those union members. It's them. Focus on them. Don't worry about everything else. I'm just, there are days I wake up and I just go, we cannot be, as a society, collectively this brain dead. It's got to be something. It's got to be the constant berating of idiotic messaging that we buy into. I got an email the other day from someone saying, well, you ask softball questions. Why don't you ask them why legislators make $80,000 a year? And I'm going, but that's not the issue. Well, if we took their money, then, you know what? That would solve our debt problems. Really? Do you buy that? It's not the case, but, the sad thing is, do you buy it? Because the General Assembly here in Pennsylvania, much like Congress, is about 1% of our budget. Okay, we solved that 1%. All right, great. Where's the rest of the money coming from? It's about 1% of the budget. I know that the right has said, well, it's like half our budget just, to feed them. Look, there's nobody more upset that after 10 years on the job in our General Assembly that you get a lifetime health care part of your pension. Nobody more upset. But I don't say take that from them. I say, why don't we figure out a way, just a thought, why don't we figure out a way that everybody gets it? Everybody. And that's always been my, okay, instead of taking from the little guy and giving to the big guy, why don't we figure out how everyone can somehow benefit from this? And I look at this patronage job that Corbett's handed out. Everybody should be out of their mind angry over this, because this is a ripoff, pure and simple. It's a ripoff. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And until we wake up and realize that what they're putting in front of us is all bull, we need to be focusing on how do we get our kids educated. We need to be focusing on how the jobs that we have pay a living wage, and how do we make sure that, and my grandparents' generation understood this. In fact, there were thinkers of that era that were taking us in the direction of saying, you know, we need to have better for the future. And I look at, you know, last week when Corbett held his press conference, and if you listen closely to the press conference, I think it was 5 or 6 times Corbett pointed at the teachers in Philadelphia and said, they're the problem. It's those teachers, those greedy teachers who haven't seen a raise in 4 years, who in fact, you know, if you looked at the last contract that they were offered, they were supposed to take, I think it was a 13% pay cut. And then depending on your seniority and where you were on the pay scale, another 13% pay cut in benefits and, you know, your health and welfare and that such. So, you know, to point at them and say, they're the problems, they actually want to feed their own children, is kind of disingenuous. But in no less than 5 times did he point to the Philadelphia teachers as they were the problem. Not that he had defunded in a systematic fashion the Philadelphia school district and education across the Commonwealth. And not that the Tamaulises of the world who are out there promoting charter schools and promoting this division and destruction of public. No, it's not that, Rick. Come on, you know better. It's the millions and millions of dollars they took out of the district. So he holds this press conference to say, okay, well, we're going to give you $265 million. See how nice we are? And anybody who was paying attention realized they didn't give them anything. They merely gave them what they were going to get. They just gave it to them early. It would be like you working for me. And I'll tell you, I'm such a good guy. I'm so wonderful that the $5 an hour that I'm going to pay you, I'm going to pay you up front, so that's not really a violation of the law. And I'm not really underfunded. I'm not underpaying you. I'm so nice that I'm giving you the money up front. See how wonderful I am? But there's the guarantee that you have to work for me. Like those teachers have to go to school, and the schools have to educate the kids, and there's no additional money there. This was another ploy. The district still has an $81 million gap that is not filled. And his little press conference did absolutely nothing to close that. But he did get a political opportunity. And understand, it is a political year. He did get the political opportunity to say, look, how wonderful. I'm giving $265 million to the schools there in Philadelphia. And it's the teacher's fault. So I need my pension to form. Because that's all most people are going to hear, and he knows that. His handlers know that. His handlers know that, oh, wow, the headline's going to read $265 million to education in Philadelphia, even though one of the newspapers had put $265,000. But, hey, that's just, it happens. They knew that was going to be the headline, though, the tagline, $265 million to Philadelphia schools. Governor calls for pension to form. He knows that. And that's what we're going to hear constantly, ad nauseum. Oh, the governor, he's trying, and it's those greedy teachers. That's the message. And yet we know once you step back and you get away from the shiny thing and actually listen to what he said, he did nothing to close the gap that he created. He did nothing to help the schools open on time and to stay open for the year. And in fact, the Republicans, and look, I blame the Republicans for everything in this state. Why? Why, Rick? Why would you possibly blame the Republicans? Honestly, because the Democrats, they don't even have to show up to work. The Democrats could have ghost jobs. Really, honestly and truthfully, because they aren't able to add anything. The Republicans don't talk to them. Every legislator that I know has said, look, they shut us out of their meetings. We don't get input into legislation. None of that. So we put stuff forward. It's always set aside. So the Democrats could have no-show jobs because they don't matter. So when you look at this, you go, it's the Republicans doing everything we've done for the last 3.5 years. By our choice, by we the voters' choice, we decided this, folks. When we went to the ballot box and we elected these people like Stephen Bloom to be our representative, We said we want a guy who's going to screw us at every opportunity. That's what we said. Be honest about it. Say, you know what? We're willing to screw ourselves a little bit. And I guess just to completely internalize this, I can say that. Yeah, I didn't vote for him, to be honest with you. But let's say I had, just better for argument's sake. I voted for the guy, let's say. So my mindset is I'm voting for this guy because it's going to hurt me. I know it's going to hurt me. I know my property tax is going to go up because of the education cuts. I know my kid's going to get less opportunity in school. I know all that. But you know what? I'm okay with that because I know at least my kid's going to have some shot to be somewhere in my area, which isn't horrible. But I do know that that guy, my buddy Bloom, guy I'm going to vote for, he's going to go after those people behind me, those leeches, those parasites, those people who just want to live on welfare and unemployment. That seems to be the mentality, folks. And it's so twisted to me. You know, but the sad thing is our General Assembly, the Republicans, they bailed. They left out of Dodge. The Philadelphia School District could have seen a tax increase that they wanted to impose on themselves in the form of a $2 a pack cigarette tax. Which, you know, hey, let's as long as we're going after people, go after the smokers. Yet they did nothing. They've created these problems and they've done nothing. And you say, well, why are they doing that? Well, to be honest, because it's their ideology. These are people who have told us time and time again they don't believe in government. They don't believe that government can do anything right, and they're working to destroy it so that it doesn't. They're working to prove their ideology correct. And we've gone through this time and time again, yet maybe we just don't, maybe we haven't been hit hard enough by the 2x4. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Anyway, let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
When the kids are united, they can never be divided. Yesterday, there's a brand new chef today.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Hi, this is Desi Doyen of the Green News Report. We'll be back soon, but until then, please enjoy this awesome encore presentation.
In America, we don't have to choose between the health of our economy and the health of our children.
Green News Report special coverage.
As president and as a parent, I refuse to condemn our children to a planet that's beyond fixing.
President Obama unveils historic new rules to cut carbon pollution and take action on climate change.
We have a moral obligation to act on climate.
All of that acting and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Why do you say that environmentalism is a rich white person's concern?
Oh, CNN, just because Ann Coulter is alive doesn't mean you have to invite her on TV and ask her opinion about stuff.
Well, because you're talking about, entire genocides if we don't have fossil fuel.
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Causing genocide by getting rid of fossil fuels. Nailed it, Ann Coulter.
This is CNN.
Tell me about it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. Very big news week this week. Landmark announcement from the Obama administration's EPA about new standards to curb carbon emissions. Of course, the folks representing the fossil fuel companies, that is to say largely, but not entirely, Republicans, are going nuts. Our friend, journalist David Dayen tweets, quote, retired coal plants to double as death panel hearing rooms under new Obama carbon plan. True or false?
I think you could say that's false.
Oh, okay.
But indeed, it is one of the strongest actions ever taken by the United States government to fight dangerous global warming. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Gina McCarthy on Monday rolled out the first ever U.S. standards for cutting carbon emissions at the nation's existing power plants.
In 2030, When the states meet their final goals, our proposal will result in 30% less carbon pollution from the power sector across the United States in comparison to 2005 levels. Thank you.
That is cutting emissions from power plants 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, the next big component of President Obama's Climate Action Plan announced last year. U.S. power plants are the biggest source, accounting for nearly 40% of U.S. emissions. Now, these are draft rules that will be finalized over the next year. The proposed standards are tailored to each state. It gives states broad flexibility to choose how best they will meet those standards. They could switch to cleaner sources of energy, invest in energy efficiency, conservation, and pollution retrofits, and they could join regional cap-and-trade programs to spur investment.
And these new standards are remarkably business-friendly. This is not unlike Obamacare in that it seems like he went out of his way to present a plan that would be accepted by business, by the power plants, by the fossil fuel companies, at least as much as you could, and still curb emissions in any kind of meaningful way.
Remember, these new standards are legally required under the Clean Air Act and several Supreme Court decisions. Obama is using executive authority because Congress has failed to act. But even though the new standards are required by law, the fossil fuel industry has promised an epic battle of litigation and legislation to stop it.
I'm shocked. Really?
Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the standards a war on coal that puts, quote, a dagger in the heart of the middle class. And like clockwork, the industry always deliberately overstates the cost of cutting their pollution, charging that it will wreck the economy. We desperately need to pollute. But as Administrator McCarthy pointed out, they have always been wrong.
In the 60s, when smog choked our cities, critics cried wolf and said EPA action would to put the brakes on the auto production. And they were wrong. In the 1990s, critics cried wolf and said fighting acid rain would make electricity go up and our lights go out. Well, they were wrong again. So time after time, when science pointed to health risks, special interests cried wolf to protect their own agenda, not the agenda of the American people. And time after time, we followed the science, we protected the American people, and the doomsday predictions never came true.
Now, these new standards will come at a cost, but the EPA estimates that it will ultimately lower electric bills and, most importantly, save $90 billion in avoided health care costs. And the American public is on board. A Washington Post ABC News opinion poll this week found 70% of Americans support regulation of power plant emissions, even if it raises costs. And that includes 68% of respondents in so-called red states. And the world is watching. The very next day after the U.S. announcement, a prominent government official in China pledged that China will limit their carbon emissions for the first time.
The question in the days, weeks, I guess years ahead, are these standards strict enough? Will the fossil fuel companies have any luck in challenging these conservative standards in court? And what difference will it make around the world with other countries looking to the U.S. for leadership here? We, of course, will be keeping our eyes on that, continuing to connect the climate change dots that really nobody else on your public airwaves does. For much more on all of these stories, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
When we go back, this is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold us. Like the ceiling can't.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I don't know if you saw the middle of last week, I think it was, that Charles Koch. How many people know who Charles Koch is? One of the billionaire Koch brothers. Charlie decided that it'd be a good idea to put an op-ed in USA Today. Because, you know, we need to have more Charles Koch information. It's not like you've got the entire Fox News network catering to his every whim. It's not like the entire orbit of talk radio is at his beck and call. It's not like he has singularly been the one who has held up the likes of Limbaugh and the rest of them. No. Don't worry. Don't look behind the curtain. Not important. Not important. But Charlie, he wanted to talk to the American people. So he put out an op-ed over there at USA Today. I just wanted to read through some of it. And I don't often, as you know, I don't often directly read articles on air, but this is beautiful. This is just amazing propaganda. I mean, this is what focus group testing, think tank approval looks like. This is what well-crafted propaganda. We care so much, and we have a vision, kind of. Just great stuff. So Charlie writes, for years, Washington politicians have said that our economy is turning the corner. They have said it in 2011 and 2013 and again last week. Every time they record a quarter with 4% economic growth, each time the economy has turned sluggish again. And, there's part of me that goes, but wait a second. Could it not be the folks like you who continue to do this stuff? Well, because we want to be able to repatriate all this money from overseas that we are hoarding. He says, like most Americans, and this is where he loses me, you're not like most Americans. He says, I am deeply concerned about our weak economic recovery and its effect on millions of families. Oh, he cares. He cares about you and your family. Yes. Yes. He says, opportunity, especially for the young and disadvantaged, is declining. High underemployment has now become the norm. Oh, he cares about those poor minorities. Isn't that sweet? He says the effects of underemployment are just not economic. They're also social and psychological. He says real work is an important part of how we define ourselves. That, by the way, is a very American thing, heaped on us by people like Koch, that we're defined by what we do, not by who we are, but what we do for work, not what we do in our community, not what we do with our families, what we do for pay. That's what he's talking about here. He said meaningful work benefits us, both us and others. Those who lack real jobs often end up depressed, addicted, or aggressive. Like those people. He says today, and I go, but that's always been the case. But I digress. He says today, opportunities for such work are not what they should be. You're right. I agree. We need a different approach, focused less on politics and more on basic principles. Here comes the values stuff. Well, I'm just going to read it, and then we'll get to it. He says, principled business. The Koch brother's going to talk to me about principled business. Okay, good. Here it comes. Here comes Charlie. First, we need to encourage principled entrepreneurship. Companies should earn profits by creating value for customers and acting with integrity, the opposite of today's rapid cronyism, of which he is a major player. And he goes on to say too many businesses focus on getting subsidies and mandates from government rather than creating value for customers. According to George Mason's Mercatus Center, heavily funded by the Koch Foundation, such favors cost more than $11,000 per person in lost GDP every year, a $3.6 trillion economic hit. He goes on to say, compounding the problem are destructive regulations affecting whether and how businesses invest and employees work. Federal rules cost America an estimated $1.86 trillion a year. And where do they get that from? Oh, yeah, that was calculated by the Competitive Enterprise Institute, another Koch-funded institute. He says at Koch Industries, we've seen how punitive permitting for large projects creates years of delays. Like drilling in your backyard. You know, like putting all the waste from the drilling and extraction industries where they make huge amounts of their money from. You know that. He says, meanwhile, 30% of U.S. employees need government licenses to work. We need a system that rewards those who create real value, not impedes them. For instance, truck drivers need to have a specific license because, you know, there's a thought that not everyone has the skill set to be able to do it. What he's basically saying is just think about your driving, that anyone can get behind the wheel of a tractor trailer and go. Go on, knock yourself out. You don't need any license. My great-grandfather didn't need a license. Granted, highway deaths were through the roof back then, but that's just another story. The guy who's working on the nuclear reactors, they don't need licenses. If they're dumb enough to walk in there without knowing what they're doing, well, shame on them. He goes on. To yell about Obamacare. You know, the reason that there are part-time jobs, and I'm tired of reading this already, because it's nonsense. Let me finish. Second, he says we should eliminate artificial cost of hiring. Government policies such as Obamacare have given businesses a powerful incentive to hire 2 part-time people instead of one. That has nothing to do with Obamacare. That was going on before. And he says, well, you know, in 2007, there were 4.4 million people working part-time, and that number now is 7.5 million people, so it had to be Obamacare. Wrong. Do you remember the whole thing that happened in 2008 when the economy collapsed? That was the major driver of part-time America. Obamacare has had little to do with it because it hasn't been in effect that long. He says, third, we got to get people who have skills and values, you know, because those lazy people have no values. He says when he was growing up, his father made him spend his free time doing unpleasant things, doing unpleasant jobs. And he doesn't give any examples, but I would love to know what a billionaire's son finds to be an unpleasant job. Did the old man make him walk behind a garbage truck picking up trash on a trash route? Is that what he did? Was he working on a farm? Was he out there shoveling manure? Was that what the billionaire kid was doing? I find that difficult to believe. He says most Americans understand that taking a job and sticking with it, no matter how unpleasant or low-paying, is a vital step toward the American dream. Is that what they understand? Do they know that? No, they know that because the reason they stay in unpleasant jobs with low pay is because they got to feed their kids. They got to feed themselves. They're not working towards the American dream. I don't know what fantasy island this guy's living on, but it has nothing to do with the American dream. It has everything to do with pure survival. And of course he goes after unemployment. He goes after food stamp programs. He says, quote, finally, we need greater incentives to work. You know, like pay a decent wage and benefits and pension. And those aren't incentives enough. We need desperation. He says costly programs such as paying able-bodied people not to work are addictive disincentives by undermining people's will to work. I love that, their will to work. Undermining it. Undermining their will to work. You know, the ability to put food on the table, you know, that's just undermining the whole thing. He said, our government has created a culture of dependency and hopelessness. This is most unfair to vulnerable citizens who suffer even as we say they are receiving benefits. And then he goes after a King quote, which, you know, I'm not gonna pervert by putting Koch's name to it. King, you know, rightly said, you know, if you're a street sweeper, you should take great pride in that. And society should have great pride in people doing that. His use of this just means that, well, you know, they should just work. To me, there's value in every job. And that value not only in what you do, but in how you're able to support your family. In what Koch has presented here is more of the same conservative line. More of the we need people desperate enough to work for pennies. We need people who aren't getting a hand up. We need people who, well, I struggle with this because it oozes of hooray for me and the heck with everyone else without realizing that everyone else is everyone else. It's the handfuls like Koch who have created this political environment that they now say, oh, see, it's not working. You should hate that. You should go along with what we've been saying, which is exactly what we're doing. And I find it ironic that the two organizations that he quotes for his statistics are organizations that he funds to push his ideology and his belief system. The sad reality, folks, is it's people like him who have destroyed this country for their own benefit. And I know, oh, but Rick, they're job creators. Yeah, as would the next guy who would have done it. I've always missed that argument. This is a guy who's taken more for himself. And to me, it's about our tax policies. More than anything. You know, his father, one of the people who began the John Birch Society, they've been pushing for their ideological dream world, which means that more for them and not much for you. And you're the one who ends up holding the bag. It is what it is. Back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
When the going gets tough, Congress gets going. On vacation, that is. They're taking off this entire month and much of September and October, having howled about a host of huge issues, including the humanitarian crisis of immigrant children crossing the U.S.-Mexico border and the growing crisis of our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Congress did nothing, then bolted off the job. Okay, they did do one thing. They filed a frivolous lawsuit against President Obama, charging that he's been governing unilaterally by issuing executive orders. But there are at least three big problems with their suit. One, Obama has issued far fewer executive orders than did George W., his GOP predecessor. Two, they claim that the president defied Congress by inadequately implementing the Obama health care reform. But hello, Republicans fought that reform tooth and nail and are still trying to stop it from being implemented, meaning they're suing him for not doing something they don't want done. And three, as they departed for vacation, howling House leaders said that in their absence, Obama should deport the suffering, terrorized migrant children who fled to the U.S. this summer. Incredibly, they demanded that, get this, the president should act unilaterally by issuing an executive order. These GOP Congress critters are nutty ideological zealots, but luckily they're also incompetent. Nonetheless, they are clogging the roadway, preventing any of the progress that America desperately needs. As a result, not only is the public fed up with them, but voter turnout is plummeting this year as people see that the hell no faction has turned Democratic participation into a farce. So why bother? This is Jim Hightower saying, it's okay that these right-wingers are killing themselves, but it's not okay that they're also snuffing out America's democracy.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
If you want to, here's to the future. He's a crying I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it
Well, that's the mantra, isn't it? That should have been the headline of the Koch article. Instead of all of this propaganda that they feed us, that you're working that crummy job just because you want the American dream. You know, if you work hard and you play by the rules, you're going to do okay. That may have been true 30 years ago. I got to be honest. You look around, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. Sorry. And in fact, when you look at the job numbers and you look at the profit margins and you look at, for instance, you read the Reuters article today. The headline, for largest U.S. companies, jobs growth has lagged profits and revenues. Which means that basically what they're saying is, look, as profits have skyrocketed, in fact, skyrocketed profits to employment 5-to-1. Corporations at the top have gotten immensely more profitable and revenues are up and everything's hunky-dory there. But those people who work, not so much. In fact, Reuters did an analysis of corporate data. They looked at the largest 100 publicly traded companies here in the U.S. from the years 2001 to 2013. What they found is that these publicly traded companies grew 71%, and inflation-adjusted operating profits rose 150%. The number of employees globally that they have, rose just 31%. So as people are more productive, as profits go up and revenues go up, not so much in the employment part of it. And we already know that wages are actually declining. They have stagnated for most, declining for many, skyrocketing for a few, but for the most part, people are where they were 10 years ago. And as the article points out, they can't tell where the jobs have been created, but they know that the jobs overseas have been created faster than here in the U.S. So these big 100 companies that we bestow huge amounts of everything upon, their companies are doing better, their shareholders are doing better, their profit margins are doing better, their CEOs are doing better. You know who's not doing better? The workers, the community, our country. And what I find interesting is I'm just not seeing the outrage. What I see is a lot of people, and this is sadly the case, a lot of people are I'm just lucky to be where I'm at now. And if I rock the boat, bad things. And I think the Koch brother types of this country and of the world have really sunken it in our brains that if we don't concede to their wishes, that if we don't do what they want, that they have no problem whatsoever collapsing our economy again. Because they're not gonna be hurt. The Koch brothers will be fine. Thank you very much. It's you and me. They're the ones who want these free trade agreements that send jobs all over the country, all over the world. They're the ones who want this cutthroat competition that force American workers to compete with Vietnamese workers. And when there is productive gains and when there are profits, they want to keep them for themselves. So I ask you, what does it take? When do we say enough? When do we vote all of the bums out of political office and put in people who are like you and me? When? Well, I would have to probably say never. Because the moneyed interests in this country never would allow that to happen. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Global labor unions are sending medical supplies to Gaza to help the thousands of civilians wounded by Israeli military attacks. The International Transport Workers Federation, the ITF, is supported in this humanitarian mission by global union federations including UNI and IUF. Stephen Cotton, acting General Secretary of the ITF, explained global labor's humanitarian aid effort in Gaza to Canada's Radio Labour.
We're able to get a plane into Gaza to try and provide support, but our second convoy is about to go. Basically, we're trying to bring medical supplies, which are for the injured people in Gaza. Got a list of things here that are going on this convoy. Surgical operations table, medicines, just trying to provide some supplies, medical supplies to help. Those supplies are going to the Jordan Hazimite charity organisation, which is directly engaged in providing crisis relief and directly involved with the United Nations. And we're hoping, that will go directly to the people, the innocent civilians who are in need of that support. And we've been very lucky in the sense that our Jordanian office, which is our Arab World office, headed by Bilal Makwali, has been able to get the contributions that are coming in are being doubled by the Jordanian connections, and so we're kind of getting double money for the process. And we've had great support from some of the other global union federations. UNI and IUF have already contributed. It's not normal for global union federations to directly contribute, but we've kind of started a new area of very, very close cooperation.
The ITF has condemned the Israeli airstrikes into Gaza as a disproportionate response that's daily killing civilians. ITF President Patty Crumlin said that we strongly condemn the strikes by the Israeli military, which are being launched into one of the most densely populated areas in the world. We call for the urgent implementation of the UN Security Council's call for an immediate ceasefire. The ITF has a member union in Gaza, the Gaza Bus Drivers Union. The International Trade Union Confederation and Industrial Global Union are also responding in a global action campaign to lobby governments for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and humanitarian aid to civilians. The unions say targeting civilians is against international law, and they're calling for accountability and justice.
Workers Independent News puts workers and their unions on the national radio news airwaves every day. To help keep labor's voice on the air, go to laborradio.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
What the hell are we fighting for? Just to run around and want it all. Just got time to say your prayer. While you're waiting for the hammer to fall.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Yeah, I'm waiting for that hammer to fall, waiting for people to take to the streets and say, enough is enough already. Fight back against the Charles Kochs of the world and his propaganda, op-eds, and all of the Koch-funded front groups and all of their Mercatus Institutes and their competitive enterprises and all of the heritages and all of those groups that are out there pushing the message. And the question is, how do you fight back against that? So when I saw that the Amalgamated Transit Union had purchased the National Labor College's campus that was set to be closed and probably turned into a church or who knows what, I was thrilled because this, I'm hoping, the beginning of that push back. And I've got the president of the American Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, on the line. Larry, thanks for taking time for us.
It's my pleasure, Rick. Good to be with you.
So this, to me, is huge news. I got to be honest, I thought that the Labor College site would be turned into something. I actually thought the Koch brothers would buy it just to put up a monument to himself, just as a thumb in the eye to organized labor and to workers in this country.
Yeah, well, actually, the direction it was going in at the time we stepped in was to be developed as a bunch of condominiums and townhomes, which frankly is, our view was that would desecrate the land. This is property that has been a labor training center and college since 1970. It's been in the hands of the AFL-CIO since 1968. And it's a place where 200,000 trade unionists, including myself and many others in the ATU, were trained early in our careers as union officers. It's where we gained the skills that we needed to go out and fight, bullies and companies. So we were disturbed at that, but at the same time, it fit completely within the guidelines that we were given by our delegates at our last convention. We have been trying to retool our union and how it deals with the community, how we interface with our riders, and we've been training for the last several years our officers to do that. But at our last convention last summer, our delegates told us to go forth and increase dramatically the amount of training we do.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry. I'll please interrupt me.
No. To me, that's a fantastic thing, and I'm thrilled as someone who holds a degree from the Labor College. I'm thrilled to hear that someone is taking that mantle and moving forward with it. Because I got to be honest, one of the biggest, one of the things that upset me the most is that thought, that idea, that let's move forward, organize, that was going to be lost. And I'm thrilled to hear that you guys have taken that mantle up and you're moving forward with it.
Yep, and we want to return it to the original intended purpose, which is not to focus on degrees and run it as a college, but rather run it as a training center for aspiring labor leaders, people who want to know more about how to organize and how to fight bullies and how to improve their communities. And that extends, obviously, not just to people within the labor movement, but also to folks who are out there fighting for social justice everywhere in every shape and form it takes.
Last summer I took my family on a labor history tour. We went across the country to a number of places, and ATU was one of the sponsors of our tour, and thank you very much for that. But one of the places we went to was the Highlander Center. And it's these kind of centers like the Highlander Center that changed so much of our history, especially for the civil rights movement back in the 60s. It's that training that people got at those kind of places that sadly we've lost a number of those throughout the years, and that's why I'm thrilled to hear that that's the idea that you're going forward. Is this just for union members? Is this for who are we focusing on?
Well, to begin with, I can give you the ATU version of this, which is that we have 200,000 members, and among them a smaller subset of officers and stewards, and we want to first start training them in a location that we own. We've done training in hotels all over the U.S. and Canada for years, and now we're going to shift that type of training to the Meany Center and bring our folks there. In addition, a huge part of our mission right now is getting our members and officers to work with the people who ride the buses. So we're going to run boot camps for passengers and community activists who want to organize transit riders all over the U.S. and Canada as well. So those are the two core things that the ATU is going to do, but obviously it is a tremendous campus. It's 46 acres with 10 buildings. And the campus will be available to people who share our values to do trainings as well. That includes people in the labor movement and outside the labor movement. And finally, we're going to move our union headquarters there.
It sounds great to me, and I'm looking forward to the work that you guys are going to be doing. And going with the riders, that's really an interesting avenue of organizing, getting people who use the service to be the advocates for the service. Because in so many cities that I've gone to, public transportation over the years has been decimated. I've gone to a number of cities where you go, how am I going to, Detroit, for instance, how do you get around Detroit? You don't, evidently, because there's very little public transportation there.
Well, we have recently heard from our locals in the state of Alabama, the place where Rosa Parks got arrested, reconfirming that it would be harder and harder for her to get arrested today because the buses running in Montgomery have been cut in half simply because of a lack of local funding and federal transit cuts. So there's no question that, you know, the future Rosa Parkses of this world are the folks that we want to bring in and train and talk to and work with to try and build a more just society.
And that's interesting because part of the whole reason that we did our labor history tour last year was my daughter came home from school and talking about Rosa Parks, and it was her belief, or what she was taught, that she was just tired. She didn't want to get up and move because she was tired from working all day, without knowing all of the training and all of the things that went into getting her to that position.
Well, and you know, one thing that I like people to consider is that when she did that, she was a black woman in the South at a time when black people were killed for, you know, glancing at a white person, and that's not an exaggeration. So she put her life on the line when she did that. It was not just the inconvenience of being taken to jail and photographed. It was a matter of, in the South in those days, there was a good question about whether or not you would ever get out of the jailhouse. So, you know, people like that, I think, should become the heroes of our union, and they have. And you know, we would like to dedicate, you know, our efforts up at the campus to helping to find more people who, like her, who have the values and the courage to stand up to make things better for everybody.
Yeah, but isn't part of that also remembering the history and having an accurate account of our history? You know, I find that, you know, labor's history has not only been taken out of the schools and you know, put in a closet somewhere, it's also being rewritten to where the organizing and the victories of workers of the past have just been either done away with or rewritten completely.
Well, that's right, and that was one of the tragedies of the AFL-CIO losing this property. You know, the entire labor archives, the George Meany archives that were there, which included the history of the labor movement throughout the country, that, you know, they've been transferred to the University of Maryland. Not lost, but, you know, they've left the House of Labor. We will make great efforts to rebuild a history room and places on the campus where people can get a much deeper understanding of, you know, who and by what sacrifice, who got us where we are today.
And I think that's extremely important. So how do I help? What can I do to help get this out to where people know about it and actually want to participate?
Well, Rick, for the next 6 months or so, we're going to kind of close the curtains and fix the place up. You know, it needs to be repaired. The dormitory rooms need some work, and our executive board has authorized the expenditures to bring it up to date. But sometime in the next 6 months, we intend to have a grand opening, and we will certainly keep you apprised of that. And you know, I guess at that point we can shamelessly promote the new reform school in Maryland.
There you go, reform school. Because, you know, to me, Netroots Nation just happened recently, and one of my thoughts was, you know, instead of having these Netroots Nation things all over the country, maybe we should have a Netroots Nation type thing there at the Meany Center, which has, or the former Meany Center, which has a beautiful convention center, the Kirkland Center, that could be easily used for that kind of stuff.
Yep, and that's our intention. It's you know, all of these things are complicated by the fact that there are not enough overnight rooms there at this point to run a very big weekend-long or week-long convention. But we're going to be moving in that direction, and certainly this will be a hub for better public engagement and social activity throughout the U.S. and Canada.
I got to tell you, Larry, I'm thrilled to hear it. I appreciate you coming and talking to us about it and filling us in. And anything that comes forward in the future, I would love to know about.
Well, thanks a lot, Rick, and we will certainly keep you up to date on all of our activities.
Great. Larry Hanley, I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
I tell you, I'm thrilled. Let's take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. There's no proven cure for Ebola, but 2 American doctors did receive an experimental drug last week and were whisked out of West Africa. The drug appears to show some medical promise, but the efficacy of the treatment is far from established. Nevertheless, many are crying foul that Americans would receive a drug while aid workers tell patients they'll have to fight the disease on their own. So in an attempt to balance medical standards with calls to roll out an unproven drug, the World Health Organization is convening a panel of bioethicists next week to discuss how to proceed.
Many of the people in the regions of the world in sub-Saharan Africa who are at risk of the disease and have the disease have very low education. Many may be illiterate or semi-literate. And so to be able to explain to them that this is an experimental treatment that may kill you, it may not work, it may not do anything, is very difficult.
Robert Klitzman is the director of the master's program in bioethics at Columbia University.
I would argue we definitely have an obligation to educate people. Just because someone has only had a second-grade education doesn't mean we shouldn't give them treatment. That doesn't diminish their rights to treatment.
Another question is, who gets treated first?
Should we give it to the healthcare workers first? Arguably, I think that may make sense to do. Should we maybe give it to the younger people because they have longer to live? Or should we give it to the teachers or the socially most beneficial people in the society? Because we may not have a huge dose on day one. I personally think it may be prudent to first give it to some and see how it's effective and monitor the people carefully, not just give it out from a truck and then no one knows if they get better or not.
Sprinkle in colonial history or the tendency for medical treatments to be concentrated in only the wealthiest countries, and it's clear just how delicate next week's ethical debate will be. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
When Surgeon General Leonard Scheel resigned his position in 1956, President Eisenhower named Leroy Edgar Birney to the post. Birney was born in Birney, a town founded by his great-grandfather in Indiana. He did pre-med studies at Butler University and completed undergraduate and medical studies at Indiana University. His entry into the world of public health came when he accepted a fellowship at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. The U.S. Senate confirmed Birney's nomination as Surgeon General in January of 1957, a year that was to bring some politically charged health findings. But Birney used his medical training and administrative experience to steer the public health service through growing pains and new demands. Birney responded boldly by reshaping and reorganizing the public health service. Join us again for Birney's Political Challenge. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
Times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you live again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again.
I gotta tell you, I'm thrilled at the idea that a training center is popping up. To me, that's it's a great idea. The idea that, and I was glad to hear it's not just going to be internal, that they're going to again reach out to everybody. That's what the labor movement that I learned about as a kid and that I envision for the future. That's where it goes, because it's all about work, but it's all about families and communities and all of the things that affect our lives, which is why the right wing in this country which is why the Koch brother and their ilk, which is why the billionaire class in this country is scared to death of an active, engaged labor movement, which is why they're scared that people are going to say, wait a second, something amiss here. So everything that they can possibly think of to do to destroy organized labor, to destroy workers' rights, they're doing. They're spending huge amounts of money to do just that. And I point to the Wall Street Journal, you know, the newspaper of the investor class. The Wall Street Journal had an article, and you got to give them credit. I mean, if you're going to shill. If you're going to be the front group, be the front group. They had an article, big headline: Coalition tells union members how to drop out. And what you've got, according to the article by the investor class's newspaper, written by a woman named Melanie Trotman, there are 79 groups that form this coalition in 44 states that are this past weekend held, that I guess this week is what it is, their annual National Employee Freedom Week. But you gotta love that, right? Kind of shield, kind of like we care, right? All kind of groups, all of these Koch brother type groups, all of the ALEC groups, all of the Nevada Policy Research Institute, and the Heritage Foundation, all of them throw in their hat and their money, which is interesting to me because most of the money comes from Lee Fang over at, he used to be with Think Progress. I think he's over at United Republic now. He did an amazing, and actually wrote a really great book on this, basically where all the money comes from. And it comes from a handful, again, back to this view that it's a handful of very, very wealthy people that, because of our tax code, we've allowed to amass enormous sums, mind-boggling sums of money that they then use to promote their worldview. And it's this Employee Freedom Week. The freedom to work for crummy wages and dangerous conditions with, no hour laws or anything. Back to the days of Lochner. Now, these 79 groups with their National Employee Freedom Week, their goal is to get union members to walk away, turn their backs on their unions. According to their studies, and I would really love to know the methodology. Honestly, I would love to know the methodology. According to them, 28% of union members want out. They don't want to pay dues. They don't want to be part of it. They want all the benefits. They just don't want to pay for it. Now, what they're saying is, you got 14.5, you got about 15 million union members in the country. 14.5, they say. I think it's a little over 15 right now. If you were to take that 28%, they're saying it would drop, about 4 million people out of the union, and that money that would come with them. And if you could gut them, if you could neuter that, which is what they're trying to do all across the country. I mean, you look here in Pennsylvania, where they're trying to push this paycheck destruction, which they call paycheck protection. Oh, we love you, paycheck people. And all it would actually do, honestly, would tell public sector workers that they couldn't pay their dues through paycheck deductions. They couldn't have a check off on their check, and just couldn't happen. It would be against the law. It would be illegal for the state and the union to negotiate that kind of an agreement. It'd be illegal. So, in knowing that once they were able to accomplish that about half of the people who are dues paying members now would stop. Not because they didn't want to, but because, you know what? It's like anything else. It falls to the bottom of the bill list at the end of the month. You just didn't write the check, whatever reason. But the right wing understands this. And once you take that power away from workers, then you begin to see all of the negative effects, which there's part of me. And I've sat and I've thought this through for a while. And to be honest, I believe that only when things get really bad, and I thought 2008 was going to be that moment. I thought 2008 was the time that things were bad enough, conditions were bad, we lost millions of jobs, millions of people lost their homes, millions and millions of people lost whatever wealth they had in those crummy 401ks, all of that stuff, with all of this negative stuff going on, that people would have then turned to each other and say, there's got to be a better way. I really thought it was bad enough. Evidently it wasn't. And I blame, this is going to be funny, coming from someone who supports unemployment, supports food stamp programs, supports a social safety net. It was because of that social safety net that things didn't get bad enough. We didn't have, as Pat Toomey would say, the harder down. We didn't have that smashing on the rocks. We didn't have families visibly living in the street. What we did is we were able to push all that stuff to the periphery. And our media never covers it. The mainstream corporate-controlled media, it's not in their best interest. It's good. It's bad for business. So you didn't see that organizing, and you didn't have the institutions that were there. You didn't have what I'm hoping ATU's center there in Silver Spring, Maryland turns into an opportunity to organize people. Not union members, not non-union members, people. Start bringing everybody back together. For 30 years, thanks to Reaganomics and thanks to that whole ideology pushed by the Reagan types, we've had 30-some years of tearing us apart, of pitting us against one another. And right now, the billionaire class sees their opportunity, and we are really at we're at a crossroads. Very much so at a crossroads in this country to where labor density is dropping. Not because workers don't want unions. On the contrary, virtually everybody I talk to, I have yet to have someone throw back to me and say, I don't want no stinking union. Every one of them agree. The conditions that they're facing at work could be better, of which they had no say. I'll give you an example. I do this weekend gig where I miss driving. I take a road trip once a week. It's a nice hobby. I put a couple of dollars in the kids' college fund, so it's a win-win for everybody. And it gives me a little time. One of the things I love about driving is it gives me time to clear my mind. You do this job long enough, you sit behind this microphone long enough, and you see and read all of the stuff that I see and read. It could make you crazy because there is a better way. So it gives me the opportunity to kind of clear my mind, just to kind of decompress, almost a therapy, if you will. And I get paid for it, and it isn't bad. But when I talk to the other people who do this job as their living, this is what they do for a living. This is how they support their family today and tomorrow. This is what their future is going to be. This is their career. Every one of them, to a man, has told me they're not happy. They're not happy with the direction that they see the place that they work at. But it's not just that one place. It's all of them. It's the entire industry. And it's industry after industry after industry. Why? Because workers have no power. They don't have the ability anymore to push back as they once did. And corporate America's scared to death that people are going to want that again. So they're coming down hard. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who said, until I talked to you, the only thing I ever knew about a union is what the company showed me in the video that I got when I got hired, of how evil and how manipulative and how they only wanted my money. Not all of the other things. And sadly, as unions continue to pull inward, their ability to get out and to do more is crushed. That's why I got to be honest. I was shocked when I saw that ATU, which is not a huge union, talking about maybe 200,000 people nationwide, that they bought this, $30 million complex, that they were going to invest in the future instead of just, we got to hold on to what's going on right now. We got to hold this. They're thinking, visionary thoughts. To me, that's huge. And maybe that by them taking this step, Maybe others will join in. So as you look back and you think about this, to me, the only way things unfortunately change is when there's mass pain and suffering. And the economy is getting a little bit better. There are more jobs. Granted, they're not paying anything, but hey, at least you got a job. And if you went from being unemployed or marginally employed for 2 or 3 years, any full-time job that boosts your income a little bit is better than nothing. But the question then becomes when that happens, because we're getting to a point where we may be moving back towards full employment. And this is where the union leaders of this country have to start thinking visionary long term. Once these jobs come back, and they will, eventually, how do you get those people to say, you know what, I'm tired of living on crummy wages. I'm tired of not being able to support my family or being able to do simple things. It'll be interesting to see where these things take us in the coming weeks and months. And it's going to be that quickly. It's going to be months. It's not going to be years. We are that close to the crossroads. It will be interesting. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
Hi, this is Desi Doyen of the Green News Report. We'll be back soon, but until then, please enjoy this awesome encore presentation.
In America, we don't have to choose between the health of our economy and the health of our children.
Green News Report special coverage.
As president and as a parent, I refuse to condemn our children to a planet that's beyond fixing.
President Obama unveils historic new rules to cut carbon pollution and take action on climate change.
We have a moral obligation to act on climate.
All of that acting and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Why do you say that environmentalism is a rich white person's concern?
Oh, CNN, just because Ann Coulter is alive doesn't mean you have to invite her on TV and ask her opinion about stuff.
Well, because you're talking about, entire genocides if we don't have fossil fuel.
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Causing genocide by getting rid of fossil fuels. Nailed it, Ann Coulter.
This is CNN.
Tell me about it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. Very big news week this week. Landmark announcement from the Obama administration's EPA about new standards to curb carbon emissions. Of course, the folks representing the fossil fuel companies, that is to say largely, but not entirely, Republicans, are going nuts. Our friend, journalist David Dayen tweets, quote, retired coal plants to double as death panel hearing rooms under new Obama carbon plan. True or false?
I think you could say that's false.
Oh, okay.
But indeed, it is one of the strongest actions ever taken by the United States government to fight dangerous global warming. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Gina McCarthy on Monday rolled out the first ever U.S. standards for cutting carbon emissions at the nation's existing power plants.
In 2030, when the states meet their final goals, our proposal will result in 30% less carbon pollution from the power sector across the United States in comparison to 2005 levels. Thank you.
That is cutting emissions from power plants 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, the next big component of President Obama's Climate Action Plan announced last year. U.S. power plants are the biggest source, accounting for nearly 40% of U.S. emissions. Now, these are draft rules that will be finalized over the next year. The proposed standards are tailored to each state. It gives states broad flexibility to choose how best they will meet those standards. They could switch to cleaner sources of energy, invest in energy efficiency, conservation, and pollution retrofits, and they could join regional cap-and-trade programs to spur investment.
And these new standards are remarkably business-friendly. This is not unlike Obamacare in that it seems like he went out of his way to present a plan that would be accepted by business, by the power plants, by the fossil fuel companies, at least as much as you could, and still curb emissions in any kind of meaningful way.
Remember, these new standards are legally required under the Clean Air Act and several Supreme Court decisions. Obama is using executive authority because Congress has failed to act. But even though the new standards are required by law, the fossil fuel industry has promised an epic battle of litigation and legislation to stop it.
I'm shocked. Really?
Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the standards a war on coal that puts, quote, a dagger in the heart of the middle class. And like clockwork, the industry always deliberately overstates the cost of cutting their pollution, charging that it will wreck the economy. We desperately need to pollute. But as Administrator McCarthy pointed out, they have always been wrong.
In the 60s, when smog choked our cities, critics cried wolf and said EPA action would put the brakes on the auto production. And they were wrong. In the 1990s, critics cried wolf and said fighting acid rain would make electricity go up and our lights go out. Well, they were wrong again. So time after time, when science pointed to health risks, special interests cried wolf to protect their own agenda, not the agenda of the American people. And time after time, we followed the science, we protected the American people, and the doomsday predictions never came true.
Now, these new standards will come at a cost, but the EPA estimates that it will ultimately lower electric bills and, most importantly, save $90 billion in avoided health care costs. And the American public is on board. A Washington Post ABC News opinion poll this week found 70% of Americans support regulation of power plant emissions, even if it raises costs. And that includes 68% of respondents in so-called red states. And the world is watching. The very next day after the U.S. announcement, a prominent government official in China pledged that China will limit their carbon emissions for the first time.
The question in the days, weeks, I guess years ahead, are these standards strict enough? Will the fossil fuel companies have any luck in challenging these conservative standards in court? And what difference will it make around the world with other countries looking to the U.S. for leadership here? We, of course, will be keeping our eyes on that, continuing to connect the climate change dots that really nobody else on your public airwaves does. For much more on all of these stories, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
When we go back, this is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can't hold up. Like the ceiling
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need. Because he's racing and racing.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So Jim sent me an email during the break. It says, Rick, you're so right. No one knows who the Koch brothers fund and the propaganda machine that they have built. He goes on to say that corporate America has done a masterful job of hiding socialism, hiding welfare, and then pointing the finger at us. And you know, Jim, when I read this email, I'm thinking back to, the dinner I had, not last weekend, but the weekend before, where a guy was telling me, well, you want socialism, without actually being able to define socialism, one. But while being okay with the fact that corporate America is basically the welfare queens, and huge amounts. It's kind of like, I said earlier, when people point at the General Assembly, well, it's those senators and congressmen who make a lot of money. They do. But pointing at them saying, well, they're the problem for the budget, when it's 1%. When people point to the federal budget and say, well, it's all that foreign aid that we give to other countries, which is less than 1% of the entire budget. Without really looking at the money that we've spent on corporate America. You bring it back here to Pennsylvania. The governor has, cut $1 billion from education. That's a fact. He took the money that was being spent on education, took it out. Where did the money that could have gone to education go? Over his tenure, we've spent, over $2 billion on sweeteners for corporations. And when you tell people that, they go, no, that's not possible. That's what happened. We gave millions and millions of dollars to this company and this group and that group under the guise that they're going to create jobs. And, over that time, what actually happened? We pursued a very conservative path of incentives and sweeteners and tax breaks and tax abatements and subsidies and, whatever, grants and all kinds of stuff that we took from education and, infrastructure and other things to give to these companies and say, oh, here, please come. Under the guise that they were going to create jobs. But you look at, and I'm not making this up, this is the Wall Street Journal, the newspaper of the investor class, saying Pennsylvania has the 4th slowest growing economy in the country. So we've done what they said. We've given all of this. Here, take it all. You're the smart people. You, the Koch brothers. We've given zero, because they say, and I love this one, Pennsylvania has the highest corporate tax income rate in the whole country, and blah 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 blah. Yet 3/4 of the companies pay zero, pay nothing. So if you're paying nothing, how could that be the highest? It's all the shiny thing. It's all BS. And you're right, Jim. It's propaganda. The propaganda machine that the Kochs and their ilk have built, second to none. Goebbels would be thrilled. I mean, take Walmart, for instance. And the Americans for Tax Fairness did a report. And, look, these are their numbers. This is reality. You want to talk about welfare? Let's talk about welfare. About $14 billion of the food stamp program, or about 18% of all food benefits money that we spend in this country, goes to Walmart. About $14 billion. You and I, the taxpayers, we subsidize the low-wage economy there at Walmart with almost $8 billion a year through public assistance programs. Now think about this for a second. Think about the win-win that's here. Just those two numbers from the folks over at the Americans for Tax Fairness. So we're giving the workers at Walmart subsidies because the wages don't meet a living standard that would be able to feed a family. They take those dollars, they spend it at Walmart. And this is just one company. I mean, Walmart is the big one, so they're the ones everybody focuses on. But all of the other ones are the same. It's the industry. And it's virtually a de-unionized industry, so the living standard of the wages are considerably lower than they were back when my grandmother was working. So you look at this, so we're subsidizing these workers who then take that money to Walmart, so they're benefiting both ways. I mean, the money is flowing in, and when you have a family like the Waltons, who have lobbied, and not just the Waltons, the entire billionaire ilk, who have lobbied for the lower tax rates and all of the abilities to shield money and trusts and who knows where. Because you and I, we don't know all the loopholes. About $3 billion a year is shielded from tax on the 4 Walmart heirs, the 4 people who basically control Walmart, because they are able to shield the billions that they take into these trusts, and it's perfectly legal. Now, understand what I'm telling you this. This is not, I'm saying they're doing something illegal. They're doing what is perfectly legal, and that's the problem. The problem is all of this stuff is perfectly legal. We have given these handfuls Huge amounts of money. And you look at the CEO of, the former CEO, he has since retired. But he took in about almost $28 million in 2013. But because they paid him in stock options and other pay for performance, it wasn't taxed like income. So it cost you and me about $40 million just for this one guy. What I'm telling you is the system is screwed up. And it's these billionaires, it's these handfuls who have lobbied for this stuff, who wanted this because they know what to do with the money, right? Well, I disagree. I guess let's take the Walmart example. Walmart knows what to do with the money. They build more facilities. They build more stores, which employ more low-wage workers, and they displace other workers who probably were making much more. Because I remember when the Walmart came to town when I lived in Cleveland, that put out the other stores that were paying a better wage. And actually, I think back to when I moved first one here, when I moved to Pennsylvania, there was a store called Clover that the workers there were making really good wages for the time, almost double what they were paying at Walmart. And immediately Clover was done. And they knew they were done. Because you had this predator that came in and just destroyed everything. And who funded it? You did. You and me, we funded it. So it's one of those situations where we're going to the gas chamber, and we had to buy the gas. It's what it is. Amazing stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
When the going gets tough, Congress gets going. On vacation, that is. They're taking off this entire month and much of September and October, having howled about a host of huge issues, including the humanitarian crisis of immigrant children crossing the U.S.-Mexico border and the growing crisis of our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Congress did nothing, then bolted off the job. Okay, they did do one thing. They filed a frivolous lawsuit against President Obama, charging that he's been governing unilaterally by issuing executive orders. But there are at least three big problems with their suit. One, Obama has issued far fewer executive orders than did George W., his GOP predecessor. Two, they claim that the president defied Congress by inadequately implementing the Obama health care reform. But hello, Republicans fought that reform tooth and nail and are still trying to stop it from being implemented, meaning they're suing him for not doing something they don't want done. And three, as they departed for vacation, howling House leaders said that in their absence, Obama should deport the suffering, terrorized migrant children who fled to the U.S. this summer. Incredibly, they demanded that, get this, the president should act unilaterally by issuing an executive order. These GOP Congress critters are nutty ideological zealots, but luckily they're also incompetent. Nonetheless, they are clogging the roadway, preventing any of the progress that America desperately needs. As a result, not only is the public fed up with them, but voter turnout is plummeting this year as people see that the hell no faction has turned Democratic participation into a farce. So why bother? This is Jim Hightower saying, it's okay that these right-wingers are killing themselves, but it's not okay that they're also snuffing out America's democracy.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but know They're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by Ask Me Council 13.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Did you see the Sarah Palin TV video that just popped out? What people are getting for their $10 a month? I guess $100 a year. If you want to be a Sarah TV viewer, I got to see some of the clips, and I got to be honest. If I were to give her a piece of advice, because people don't really understand how difficult this job is. You're just talking for 3 hours, Rick. Not that hard. Anybody can do it. Well, anybody can. They just can't do it well. And I look at Sarah Palin, who doesn't do it well, because this takes a lot of preparation. You actually have to have an idea of where you're going, what you're doing. There's a lot of work in this. Something that the right doesn't actually like. And because that's one of the things that I give Limbaugh credit for. He's actually very well prepared. And a lot of the big name ones their staff gets them very well prepared. Evidently, Sarah Palin doesn't have that staff. And look, understand, this is just about the money. This is about how much cash she can put into her pocket. And I think it's a horrible mistake that she's done. Politically, a horrible mistake. Not for her ever holding office again, just because when I moved from doing a weekend show, which was just a couple hours on the weekend, to doing it 5 nights a week, 3 hours a day. One of the things that one of my advisors had said is, look, this is a different arena. There's now more of you, so you now have to be even more prepared. There's something to be said about having less content that you spend more time and putting together. And we're actually considering moving back to a shorter program time because funding levels have fallen and all of that stuff. But when I look at Palin, who is horribly underprepared, and I look at what because she really has built something for herself of a media presence. The more that she's out there, the more Sarah there is, the more America, I think, wakes up to the fact that she's a kook. The more people wake up to she's really an empty dress. There's nothing there. She can regurgitate a talking point, does it very well. But once you get to the second level, there's nothing. There's no real understanding of the issues. She got away with, I'm a pretty face and I look good in a pretty dress for a while. And she was able to say some incendiary things. She was able to, light things on fire and then walk away. Got my point in, bang, gone. This doing every day, oh boy, treasure trove of insanity. And the clip that I saw, she played a clip of Elizabeth Warren talking about minimum wage workers and going out on the picket line and supporting them. And her commentary of about 10 seconds was golden. Nothing. She stuttered and stammered and had not a point, of which, as I watched the whole first series of programming, is basically that. She plays a couple of clips, those, with nothing to say. You can only do a 7-second soundbite once. So once you do that 7-second soundbite, you've then got to follow that up with actual thought. For instance, she was talking about the minimum wage and how those aren't full-time, lifelong gigs. It's not true. I know a number of people who have been doing fast food jobs for 10, 15, 20 years. I've met numerous people. That's their job. That's what they do. And for me, it's about how do we make sure that those jobs, that these people take great pride in. To use the King quote that the Koch brother screwed up. He's a fast food worker, and he should be the best fast food worker there is and take great pride in what he does, but also be able to feed and support his family. That we should have dignity and respect in that job based on him being able to survive. She kind of just poo-poos the whole thing away. No one does that. That was just, again, the talking point, without actually knowing anything about the issue. And that's a lot of what we hear from the right wing, isn't it? Especially about minimum wage. Well, if you raise the minimum wage, they're going to mechanize. Well, you know what? They're going to mechanize anyway. They've been down that path anyway. And I look to this new machine out, a Silicon Valley-based corporation named Momentum Machines, claims they have developed a hamburger flipper. The co-founder of the company, Momentum, Alexandros Veritakis, he says, our device isn't meant to make employees more efficient. It's meant to completely obliviate them. And that really is the mindset of corporate America. It's not about making people more efficient. If there's a machine out there at any point that does away with somebody, the machine is in, because that machine can work 24/7, 365. You don't have to pay wages, even crummy wages. So this argument that the Palins of the world, wow, if you raise the minimum wage, people will mechanize. No, they're going to mechanize anyway. It's going to happen. And eventually, whenever they can, they're going to mechanize every job. I was talking to a guy the other day, about driving a truck. I said, Google, there's a company that has a Google kind of truck that's actually driving up and down the roads. The Google car's got a couple million miles on it now. Accident-free, incident-free. And you don't think trucks are doing that? I saw the new, I think Peterbilt came out with it. I was watching a video of the new semi. Amazing. But eventually, it does away with the driver because of all the technology. I mean, you want to talk about, it's like a spaceship. It is that amazing. And you're no longer sitting on the right side or the left side. The driver's in the middle. They've done away with all the. It's like a rocket ship. It is amazing. But it's all electronic. It's got sensors and cameras and gadgets and whatnots and you name it. It basically drives itself. That's where we're heading. So, it's not that truck drivers' wages are too high. It's that if you can get rid of people entirely, that's the idea. Which is why you see the likes of Sarah Palin out there, hitting talking points, because that's all she knows. But you know what she does know? She knows the people who pay her check. The people who sign that check, that's who she cares about. And the sad reality is what we've done in this country is we've listened to too many of the Sarah Palins without actually talking to our friends and neighbors, without actually talking to the people who may be us. I mean, November's coming around the corner. None of the people in power, meaning the Republicans, should get our vote. None of them. Because they're the ones who've mucked up this whole system. And, I would love to see a third party. I would love to see a labor party. I would love to see a consumer party. It's not going to happen. Money and interest ain't going to let that happen. Because what they've got now, they're in control of. They don't want to let go of the steering wheel. Nope, don't want to do that. That would be, well, like ceding some kind of power back to the people. Frustrating on a number of levels. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. Get the podcast there at the website. We've got this great app on the smartphone. You got to get it. Take it with you wherever you go. The Rick Smith Show. Just if you've got Google Play or if you've got iTunes, just look up the Rick Smith Show. All one word, all spaced out, whichever. It should get you right there. Download that. Take the program wherever you go on the go. And, of course, you can always email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Shoot me a tweet, Twitter, at Rick Smith Show. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Global labor unions are sending medical supplies to Gaza to help the thousands of civilians wounded by Israeli military attacks. The International Transport Workers Federation, the ITF, is supported in this humanitarian mission by global union federations including UNI and IUF. Stephen Cotton, acting General Secretary of the ITF, explained global labor's humanitarian aid effort in Gaza to Canada's Radio Labour.
We're able to get a plane into Gaza to try and provide support, but our second convoy is about to go. Basically, we're trying to bring medical supplies, which are for the injured people in Gaza. Got a list of things here that are going on this convoy. Surgical operations table of medicines, just trying to provide some supplies, medical supplies to help. Those supplies are going to the Jordan Hazimite charity organisation, which is directly engaged in providing crisis relief and directly involved with the United Nations. And we're hoping, that will go directly to the people, the innocent civilians who are in need of that support. And we've been very lucky in the sense that our Jordanian office, which is our Arab World office, headed by Bilal Makwali, has been able to get the contributions that are coming in are being doubled by the Jordanian connections, and so we're kind of getting double money for the process. And we've had great support from some of the other global union federations. UNI and IUF have already contributed. It's not normal for global union federations to directly contribute, but we've kind of started a new area of very, very close cooperation.
The ITF has condemned the Israeli airstrikes into Gaza as a disproportionate response that's daily killing civilians. ITF President Patty Crumlin said that we strongly condemn the strikes by the Israeli military, which are being launched into one of the most densely populated areas in the world. We call for the urgent implementation of the UN Security Council's call for an immediate ceasefire. The ITF has a member union in Gaza, the Gaza Bus Drivers Union. The International Trade Union Confederation and Industrial Global Union are also responding in a global action campaign to lobby governments for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and humanitarian aid to civilians. The unions say targeting civilians is against international law, and they're calling for accountability and justice.
Workers Independent News puts workers and their unions on the national radio news airwaves every day. To help keep labor's voice on the air, go to laborradio.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Bonnie sent me an email with a link to Pat Robertson's story. And you know how much I love talking about Pat Robertson and the insanity that he brings to the airwaves. Evidently today, Pat had a retired general on his program talking about how Obama has screwed up Iraq and how they need the angels to come in and intervene because he said that this is a feckless administration and they are unwilling to act except in feckless terms. He prays that the angels come down and do miracles. And maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need the angels to come in, because I'm not quite sure that sending our troops back into that area is going to help. But what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is kind of a rewriting. And actually, for some time, a rewriting of what's gone on in Iraq, which is why I've asked Thomas Bishop. He's a senior researcher over at Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org, the website. Thomas, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So, I look at Pat Roberts' statement, that we need the angels to come in and do miracles. I'm not against it. Send angels.
Yeah, this is a part of what we call Obama derangement syndrome by the right-wing media, and they're trying to rewrite history whenever they can to kind of absolve the Bush administration for everything that they caused in the last decade.
You mean like Obama pulling all those troops out of there?
Right. So Obama gives humanitarian aid to Iraq, and the right-wing media attacks him for it. And they are actually blaming him for ISIS being in Iraq and Syria in the first place because he, all by himself, pulled out all of the troops from Iraq, forgetting that there was an entire Iraqi government that didn't want American troops there.
Right.
And we could not get a status of forces agreement that protected the troops because the Iraqi government didn't want us there. The people of Iraq didn't want us there at the time.
And if I remember right, the Bush administration had pretty much had us going out anyway without anything that Obama would have done, right?
Right. So the extension of the status of forces agreement ended in December of 2011. And so if they would have extended it further when they had the opportunity, we wouldn't have been put in the situation where we had to wait for the Iraqi political situation to fix itself to even get this kind of agreement. So the fact that it went up to the Iraqi government and at one of their worst times trying to figure out if they even wanted troops there is how we got in a situation where we had to pull out all of our troops, not leaving any residual forces.
Not to mention, I think the American people wanted the hell out of Iraq. I mean, to be honest, it's not a fight I think most people wanted.
I think that was one of the reasons why Barack Obama won with the mandate that he had. We were tired of fighting two wars at the same time for reasons why we learned we weren't supposed to be in Iraq in the first place.
You mean the weapons of mass destruction that weren't there?
Oh, right-wing media is rewriting history again. Apparently, they are there, and ISIS has them. And it's Obama's fault that they have those weapons of mass destruction that never existed.
You mean like when Bush said this?
The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't.
Turns out he didn't.
Exactly.
Or one of my most favorite Bush moments. One of the press club dinners, and I don't know if you saw this, but I have to play this every time because to me it's one of the most despicable bits of audio that I have.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
I don't even know where to go with that, to be honest with you. I mean, every time I hear that and every time I play it, I get angry.
I actually think he was onto something with that. He was looking over at the right-wing media, and he found weapons of mass destruction right there.
Good point. But the thing that gets me is, they took us into this adventure, this misadventure, under the guise that aluminum tubes, yellow cake, you're all lies. Yet, as you've pointed out, we're rewriting that stuff.
Yeah, we definitely are. On the Sunday shows and all today, on all of conservative media, you have conservatives blaming Obama and also blaming Hillary Clinton for the things that never actually happened. We tried. There are articles that show President Obama and the U.S. foreign policy at the time was to try to leave some residual forces if we could come up with a status of forces agreement that protected the American soldiers.
Where's the media in all of this saying that the biggest mistake was made by a guy named Paul Bremer, that if you really want to blame all of this mess on anyone, Bremer would be the guy I would blame for the outside of going in. Bremer would be the guy I would blame for everything else.
They seem to be MIA on that part of the story. Right now, everyone is focused on why we are going back to Iraq in this humanitarian aid. It's actually a part of the Genocide Convention that is the reason why we have to help the Iraqis right now. That is our mandate, and that's why we are doing the limited strikes and humanitarian aid that we're doing right now to stop a genocide. That is it.
And why aren't we hearing that? I mean, again, I go back to this question of why. How is it that our media is laying down on the job that badly?
Right now, we have a media that has really gone away from the Obama administration, and they're looking to the next elections, and they only want to attack Obama.
But Thomas, I'm told the entire liberal media is out there. It's all liberals. It's all people, those lefties who, it's all them. It's no conservatives. Our media is dominated by Hollywood and the liberal elites.
Yeah, and if you look at the polls, everything that President Obama has done in his foreign policy has followed the American people, but because the media has been absent, that story hasn't been told. What he's actually doing follows everything that the American people want, because we don't want to be bogged down in two wars that don't have a necessarily end again, and no one's telling that story.
Which is why I think it's important that the work that you guys do over at Media Matters gets out and people hear what's actually going on, and maybe start holding some of these media outlets accountable for I would say not just falling down on the job, but actually misinforming people.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what we try to do with outlets like Fox and the Weekly Standard and all of the misinformation and revisionist history going on right now.
Revisionist. I had dinner with a guy weekend past who told me, and I had to leave. FDR was a pacifist. He caused the Great Depression. J.P. Morgan actually bailed us out of the Great Depression, even though he was dead at the time. All of this, and that, we need to fight these wars because we would be slaves. And I'm listening to all of this. And this is a fairly educated, solidly middle-class person telling me this stuff. And I got to tell you, it scared the hell out of me.
Well, it's convenient to live in that world where everything that you believe is the way that it is, and that's a part of the right-wing media, giving people the red meat that they want to make them feel better.
But how do you believe that stuff? I mean, this is a guy who's a little bit older than me, so I knew he had at least some education. How do you completely change someone's educational movements and change the way I'm struggling with it?
You don't tell them anything else except for what you hear. Education is great, but if the only thing that you see on all the networks and all the radio are these conservative ideas and ideologies, that's the only thing that you're going to believe, and that's what we're seeing out there.
I saw over the weekend, Laura Ingraham there was on talking about that, and she actually, the more she talked, the more it became apparent that all this stuff lays at Bush's feet, even though they didn't want to admit to
it. Because they know that they are guilty of putting us in that situation. There weren't enough people who were demanding answers at the time. There weren't enough people questioning why we were there or what we were doing. And now they're trying to absolve themselves of the sins of misinformation with new misinformation.
Good point. So what do we do? What do we do to combat this? I mean, what do? Because look, I look at a lot of people who tell me these things as decent people who just they want information. What do we do?
You have to actually see the first person details. You have to listen to Obama's speeches. You have to see what they're doing and what they said. And it becomes very clear quickly that what these right-wing media people are purporting is not true. And you can just go to the tape and see it. And that's what we do at Media Matters is we hold up what they say against what was actually said. And you don't really need to do much else because their misinformation is clear.
And your last question, in your estimation, what's the most egregious thing that's come out recently of rewriting the Iraq war history? In your thoughts?
I think that we actually put al-Maliki in place. This was something that came out today. When al-Maliki came to power in 2006, that type of disconnect between even the times where people existed and Obama being president doesn't matter anymore.
Interesting. Not all those people who were walking around with their finger in ink, because I seem to remember an election that went on. And I went to the Bush Museum, and I got to see the picture of the woman with the ink on her finger.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of revisionist history going around in all of foreign policy. They are blaming President Obama for everything that happened in Libya when there was a coalition, and Gaddafi was an actual threat to the American public more than a lot of the other things these neocons wanted to do at the time.
Yeah, I love that. This revision of how Gaddafi was a decent guy that we should have supported. I'm going, really? I remember he gave up some weapons because he wanted money. I remember that. I don't remember him being a charitable person, though.
Yeah, it is the Obama derangement syndrome. Whatever he does, they just do the opposite. It doesn't matter what they said before. Whatever he's saying right now, they will believe the opposite is true.
Does that only apply to Obama, or if Hillary Clinton wins in 2016, will it be the Hillary derangement, or is it just the anything but what we tell you derangement syndrome?
It is the right-wing derangement syndrome, 100%. It doesn't matter the person, fill in the liberal's name, and they have done it.
Well, I don't know that I would call Obama a liberal, but I guess in their world, anybody
that's not a Tea Partier is liberal to them.
That's it. Thomas, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks for filling us in on this, and I look forward to talking to you again at some point.
All right, thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much. Thomas Bishop, senior researcher over at Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org. The website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
We gotta get organized. We gotta do it today. No more madness than fury. No more disarray. We gotta get organized.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. There's no proven cure for Ebola, but 2 American doctors did receive an experimental drug last week and were whisked out of West Africa. The drug appears to show some medical promise, but the efficacy of the treatment is far from established. Nevertheless, many are crying foul that Americans would receive a drug while aid workers tell patients they'll have to fight the disease on their own. So in an attempt to balance medical standards with calls to roll out an unproven drug, the World Health Organization is convening a panel of bioethicists next week to discuss how to proceed.
Many of the people in the regions of the world in sub-Saharan Africa who are at risk of the disease and have the disease have very low education. Many may be illiterate or semi-literate. And so to be able to explain to them that this is an experimental treatment that may kill you, it may not work, it may not do anything, is very difficult.
Robert Klitzman is the director of the master's program in bioethics at Columbia University.
I would argue we definitely have an obligation to educate people. Just because someone has only had a second-grade education doesn't mean we shouldn't give them treatment. That doesn't diminish their rights to treatment.
Another question is, who gets treated first?
Should we give it to the healthcare workers first? Arguably, I think that may make sense to do. Should we maybe give it to the younger people because they have longer to live? Or should we give it to the teachers or the socially most beneficial people in the society? because we may not have a huge dose on day one. I personally think it may be prudent to first give it to some and see how it's effective and monitor the people carefully, not just give it out from a truck and then no one knows if they get better or not.
Sprinkle in colonial history or the tendency for medical treatments to be concentrated in only the wealthiest countries, and it's clear just how delicate next week's ethical debate will be. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
When Surgeon General Leonard Scheel resigned his position in 1956, President Eisenhower named Leroy Edgar Birney to the post. Birney was born in Birney, a town founded by his great-grandfather in Indiana. He did pre-med studies at Butler University and completed undergraduate and medical studies at Indiana University. His entry into the world of public health came when he accepted a fellowship at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. The U.S. Senate confirmed Birney's nomination as Surgeon General in January of 1957, a year that was to bring some politically charged health findings. But Birney used his medical training and administrative experience to steer the public health service through growing pains and new demands. Birney responded boldly by reshaping and reorganizing the public health service. Join us again for Birney's Political Challenge. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
The rich pay too much taxes, the poor get way too much. Instead of schools, build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican.
Ah, yes. Yeah, he cares. Cares about the children. Wants to send in the angels. I love Pat Robertson. I mean, the insanity. Pat Robertson and Sarah Palin should do a program together. Although I don't know who would out-crazy the other. I just don't. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Send in the angels. And who could be against that? I mean, I'm not against sending in the angels. Let the angels go in and do it, right? Nuts. Just nuts. Oh. A Reagan appointee. I can't believe we're still fighting over this. James Parker, U.S. District Judge, ruled last week that having the Ten Commandments in the Bloomfield, New Mexico area there on a public land amounted to a tacit endorsement of Christianity and had to be removed because one of those Wiccans, they were angry that there was the Ten Commandments on city property, which I kind of already thought we went over. If we're not going to put everyone's commandments, which I'm sure the Pastafarians would come up with something, and I'm sure the Wiccans would come up with something, and I know the Muslims would want something. If you're not going to do that on public land because there's not supposed to be a pushing of religion, look, believe whatever you want. And I've always believed that. Believe whatever it is you want. Have your own faith. Individual. Keep it yourself. It just shouldn't be on public land. Because look, I don't necessarily know that I want my kids, and you know, I've had these arguments with people. They say, well, we should have prayer in school. I go, okay, well, which one? Well, our prayer. What do you mean our prayer? What if I don't believe in your prayer? It's like, when I grew up in the Catholic Church. The Lord's Prayer didn't have that little tagline at the end. You go to other churches, they got the little tagline at the end. What if I don't want that? Or what if I don't want my kids exposed to whatever else you're throwing out? And I asked one person recently who said, well, we should have the prayer. I go, okay, well, do you mind if your kids pray to Allah? Well, I wouldn't have that. I go, but some people do. There are some Jewish kids in my kids' class. There are some Muslim kids in my kids' class. Should they have to go against their beliefs? And I guess it goes back to that whole experiment thing. Of believe whatever the hell it is you want, just don't force it down my throat. Anyway, the Reagan appointee ruled that it had to come down, which enraged the Christians. They're under attack, and it's the end of the world, and God's gonna smite us, and the whole 9 yards. And if you think about it, when I saw this story, I kind of chuckled and go, well, because look, I'm not against having the 10 Commandments plastered everywhere. I've actually come to that position. I'm not against it anymore, because maybe by having it plastered everywhere, maybe those Christians will start being decent people. Because evidently they can't remember the 10 rules. Maybe by having the 10 rules plastered everywhere, maybe they'll remember to be decent human beings. Just a thought. But if you do think that now, because the 10 Commandments are gone from Alabama and now out of New Mexico, that God will smite us and it's the end of the world, you'd have to buy into this couple in Texas. Evidently, a couple of years ago, I guess back in 2006, actually 2004 is when this mostly started. This family decided they were going to homeschool their kids. They've got a whole litter of children. I think there was 5 or 6 or 10, or I think it was 5. They decided they're going to homeschool their kids. So what they did is they rented a space out of the guy's brother's shop, and they set up a little classroom kind of thing, and they're pretending like they're going to teach. And the guy said, I saw them, singing and playing instruments. And no, they've got 9 kids. Sorry, I was right, a whole litter, 9. So they had these 9 kids go forth and be fruitful kind of Christians. But according to the guy's brother, he never saw him doing any actual schoolwork. They weren't reading. They weren't using calculators. They weren't using computers. They didn't do any math. There's none of that. They were just playing, singing, and having a high old time. And one of the parents, this guy overheard one of the parents, talking about that they didn't believe in doing schoolwork because they were going to be raptured. So he calls the school and says, hey, you got to do something. These kids aren't doing anything. Around the same time, one of the kids runs away from home to attend school. So the school district had to do something. So this went through a whole long court battle. It now has been decided by a Republican-appointed judge that these parents don't have the right to not school their children because they believe they're going to be raptured. According to the judge, no parents have ever prevailed in any reported case on a theory that they have an absolute constitutional right to educate their children in the home, completely free of any state supervision, regulation, or requirement. The ruling went on to say they do not have an absolute constitutional right to homeschool, which is interesting, because I got to wonder how many crazy people are going, it's my constitutional right. But it does bring the question, we'll let anybody be a parent, won't we? You need a license to get a dog, but anyone can have a brood of 9 children. Which brings me to my last bad parent story. Evidently, an Australian mother wanted her kid to have a dancing career. Care about the children. We'll do anything for our kids. We just love them. Oh, boy, we do. So she decided to send nude photos of herself and the child to the dance instructor because that was going to get the kid into the dance classes, because the pictures, as it has been reported, made the dance instructor excited and frisky, if you will. She didn't like doing it, but she knew that that's how her daughter was going to be able to get ahead. And I got to go, he was arrested on multiple charges of child pornography. But you got to wonder what kind of a parent would do something like this. What kind of an idiot would go, I know it was wrong, but I love my children. Nuts. Just nuts. Quick break, right back.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Stay alive.
Hi, this is Desi Doyen of the Green News Report. We'll be back soon, but until then, please enjoy this awesome encore presentation.
In America, we don't have to choose between the health of our economy and the health of our children.
Green News Report special coverage.
As president and as a parent, I refuse to condemn our children to a planet that's beyond fixing.
President Obama unveils historic new rules to cut carbon pollution and take action on climate change.
We have a moral obligation to act on climate.
All of that acting and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Why do you say that environmentalism is a rich white person's concern?
Oh, CNN, just because Ann Coulter is alive doesn't mean you have to invite her on TV and ask her opinion about stuff.
Well, because you're talking about, entire genocides if we don't have fossil fuel.
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Causing genocide by getting rid of fossil fuels. Nailed it, Ann Coulter.
This is CNN.
Tell me about it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. Very big news week this week. Landmark announcement from the Obama administration's EPA about new standards to curb carbon emissions. Of course, the folks representing the fossil fuel companies, that is to say largely, but not entirely, Republicans, are going nuts. Our friend, journalist David Dayen tweets, quote, retired coal plants to double as death panel hearing rooms under new Obama carbon plan. True or false?
I think you could say that's false.
Oh, okay.
But indeed, it is one of the strongest actions ever taken by the United States government to fight dangerous global warming. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Gina McCarthy on Monday rolled out the first ever U.S. standards for cutting carbon emissions at the nation's existing power plants.
In 2030, when the states meet their final goals, our proposal will result in 30% less carbon pollution from the power sector across the United States in comparison to 2005 levels. Thank you.
That is cutting emissions from power plants 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, the next big component of President Obama's Climate Action Plan announced last year. U.S. power plants are the biggest source, accounting for nearly 40% of U.S. emissions. Now, these are draft rules that will be finalized over the next year. The proposed standards are tailored to each state. It gives states broad flexibility to choose how best they will meet those standards. They could switch to cleaner sources of energy, invest in energy efficiency, conservation, and pollution retrofits, and they could join regional cap-and-trade programs to spur investment.
And these new standards are remarkably business-friendly. This is not unlike Obamacare in that it seems like he went out of his way to present a plan that would be accepted by business, by the power plants, by the fossil fuel companies, at least as much as you could, and still curb emissions in any kind of meaningful way.
Remember, these new standards are legally required under the Clean Air Act and several Supreme Court decisions. Obama is using executive authority because Congress has failed to act. But even though the new standards are required by law, the fossil fuel industry has promised an epic battle of litigation and legislation to stop it.
I'm shocked. Really?
Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the standards a war on coal that puts, quote, a dagger in the heart of the middle class. And like clockwork, the industry always deliberately overstates the cost of cutting their pollution, charging that it will wreck the economy. We desperately need to pollute. But as Administrator McCarthy pointed out, they have always been wrong.
In the 60s, when smog choked our cities, critics cried wolf and said EPA action would to put the brakes on the auto production. And they were wrong. In the 1990s, critics cried wolf and said fighting acid rain would make electricity go up and our lights go out. Well, they were wrong again. So time after time, when science pointed to health risks, special interests cried wolf to protect their own agenda, not the agenda of the American people. And time after time, we followed the science, we protected the American people, and the doomsday predictions never came true.
Now, these new standards will come at a cost, but the EPA estimates that it will ultimately lower electric bills and, most importantly, save $90 billion in avoided health care costs. And the American public is on board. A Washington Post ABC News opinion poll this week found 70% of Americans support regulation of power plant emissions, even if it raises costs. And that includes 68% of respondents in so-called red states. And the world is watching. The very next day after the U.S. announcement, a prominent government official in China pledged that China will limit their carbon emissions for the first time.
The question in the days, weeks, I guess years ahead, are these standards strict enough? Will the fossil fuel companies have any luck in challenging these conservative standards in court? And what difference will it make around the world with other countries looking to the U.S. for leadership here? We, of course, will be keeping our eyes on that, continuing to connect the climate change dots that really nobody else on your public airwaves does. For much more on all of these stories, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
When we go back, this is the moment. Tonight is the night. We'll fight till it's over. So we put our hands up like the ceiling can hold us.
Most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Yeah. Well, this isn't really news. It's just something that grabbed my attention that made me go, really? Someone's getting away with this? Evidently, this Union Street guest house, which is up in the Catskills in New York, one of those fancy, swanky kind of places that you go to have your wedding receptions and stuff. Evidently, in the same neighborhood of the estates built by the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers. So you're in a good address. Evidently, what they're getting away with is if you have a wedding there or any event, and someone who attends puts a bad review on social media anywhere, any of those social media sites, they're going to fine you $500 for every one of those bad reviews. And according to their online policy, they write, please know that despite the fact that wedding couples love Hudson and our inn, your friends and families may not. If you have booked the inn for a wedding or other type of event and given us a deposit of any kind, there will be a $500 fine for every negative review placed on any internet site by anyone in your party. So I was thinking about this. Maybe you just go, and if there's someone you don't like an ex is getting married, whole bunch of bad reviews. Just a thought. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be here. How terrible is it that my mind went exactly the same place yours did when you were talking about that? It's like, that's just terrible. I think we need to get checked up.
Well, I mean, how do you enforce that? And who would be dumb enough to give you such a large deposit that you could take that kind of money out? $500 per review, really?
No, exactly. Plus, I mean, this is the internet we're talking about. This isn't a well-regulated area of talk, and I could see a lot of people taking advantage of this very quickly. Yeah, it's just. I mean, is there a grievance process where you go, that person really wasn't there? Nuts. But I guess well, I guess this is the world we're beginning to live in. I guess so. That's pretty shocking, though, and I have a feeling that it's only going to take a few weddings before they're going to realize that that's kind of harder to enforce than anybody would really be realizing.
And how do you tell that to all the people coming to your wedding? Now, my wedding's got to be perfect, because if it's not, and you say something to someone, it's going to cost me a boatload of money.
No, seriously. I mean, there's enough wedding concerns to worry about without worrying about if the best man's going to get drunk and maybe post on Twitter that the bathroom's a little dirty or something like that.
Yeah, well, nuts. Well, what's going on in the world? What's the latest going on in Iraq?
Iraq, of course, is taking up a lot of the oxygen in the room. We have now heard from the Pentagon that we have had about 15 airstrikes in order to try to maintain the city of Erbil. We've also apparently carried out 14 humanitarian airdrops using U.S. and U.K. aircraft. And we're also, getting some more insight into the actual process itself, according to Lieutenant General William C. Mayville, who talked to reporters today. He said that the U.S. has blunted some tactical decisions from ISIS, but overall the U.S. has not contained or broke the threat that's currently being carried out by the organization, which, of course, raised a few eyebrows, since he also in the same breath said that the U.S. has sort of halted its tempo, or halted ISIS's tempo, rather, which, really raises some questions over what exactly is going on over there and what exactly the mission may be, since the U.S. has not really been as clear as a lot of people would like about this.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this as just that first step into, it's only a matter of time before we're back knee-deep in this mess.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what a lot of people are saying here. This, of course, is not being billed as the administration by, as an attempt to wipe out ISIS at large. But at the same time, if they're really that much of a threat as, the administration is claiming, it may have made more sense to actually try to, take them down with this mission instead of, simply, going forward with the humanitarian aspect of it, or trying to prevent a genocide or whatnot, and then leaving.
So what do you think of the idea that Pat Robertson came up with? We send in the angels.
I don't think I saw his quote on that, but that sounds, pretty akin to what he would say. But here's my idea. If we're going to take Pat Robertson's advice, we should just send in a bunch of, single mothers and lesbians and whatnot, and then, terrorists will attack them, because apparently that's what happened during 9/11, according to Mr. Robertson.
It's nuts. And I got to tell you, nobody I know wants us back involved in that mess. In fact, I find it interesting that Laura Ingraham was saying over the weekend that, things weren't as bad when Hussein was in power, which I think a lot of people are now coming around to. Something I said from the beginning, just stay the hell out of there from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, this entire war was founded on pretty much false pretenses from the very beginning. This was not about trying to liberate a people. This was not about there being a very big, evil, nasty dictator. This was strictly about the presence of weapons of mass destruction, which were determined to pose a threat to the U.S. And the fact that once, those weapons were not found, the entire war and the entire reason that we went to war was, pretty much a failure.
So, as George Bush said,
the main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't.
He didn't have it.
No, exactly. So at least with this one, you can make the argument that this is a, purely humanitarian mission into Iraq. But of course, we're seeing reports about the city of Erbil itself, the capital of Kurdistan, and we're seeing what kind of interests we're protecting. And a lot of those, of course, are, foreign oil interests, including a lot of U.S. executives.
Wow. Anybody surprised at that?
No. I mean, I certainly wasn't surprised. I figured that was probably the reason going in, but seeing it so well documented so soon after this happens is, a little bit of a shock, since it typically takes a little while, at least for the sort of stars and stripes chest beating atmosphere to wear off.
Because I asked it all the time. What interests do I have over there? I don't personally have any interests over there. I know American corporations have some interests. I know multinationals have tons of interests. I don't know that any of them align with mine, but we now see whose interests are more important.
Exactly, and it's hard to argue, of course, that there were no, American interests perhaps in Syria or other countries where we have sort of let mass atrocities take place without intervention. And it's, of course, very telling that as soon as, people's portfolios are threatened, we're now seeing a U.S. intervention. So it's disheartening to say the least, but it's not really necessarily surprising when you consider the larger history of, modern America.
Are we surprised that Hillary Clinton's trying to distance herself from Obama?
No, this was something that was, of course, going to happen for quite some time. You know, she's had sort of the luxury of not being in the race yet officially, so she's been able to sort of hold off making any bona fide statements until it's absolutely positive that she's going to be showing up on the right side of history, and that's what it looks like she's doing here. She was able to make the argument that the administration at large failed by not, moving in sooner to equip Syrian rebels, because that ultimately is what led to ISIS. And of course, she's able to make that sort of statement from, her position removed from the administration. But it's sort of telling to see that she is, of course, capable of separating herself from Obama, and it's going to be interesting to see what else she changes her, her position on further down the road.
Yeah, I mean, because if I remember right, wasn't that McCain's position as well? We should be sending over arms and arming the rebels.
Exactly. It was, certainly McCain's position. This was, I think I may also be putting it kind of lightly, since I think if McCain had his way on any of these, we would be, knee deep in American troops and whatnot. But yeah, no, that was certainly a more hawkish position than the administration was willing to take. The administration ultimately made the decision to not entangle the U.S., in part due to some huge public pressure that came out around that time. If you remember, support for intervention in Syria was off the charts against it. There was, sort of a preemptive anti-war movement, before it even progressed. And we even had certain figures such as the First Lady herself, who was, according to the president, speaking out against it. So, if we were to move in at that point, it's not very likely that would have been the popular decision to make.
Yeah, but we don't rule on who's popular's decision. We do what's right, and what's right is bombing people, right?
In that situation, it looks like we actually averted it due to, grotesque public opinion against it. But at the end of the day, I think it's hard to find any situation where the U.S. has used, military might that hasn't ultimately affected America's bottom line.
Yep, good point. And finally, the weekend, another one of these kids getting shot in the middle of the street, no gun, white cop, black kid. What the hell is going on?
It's a very good question. This one, of course, was very disheartening. This was in Ferguson, a suburb in St. Louis, Missouri. A black kid who, according to eyewitnesses, was unarmed, was shot. They haven't confirmed the amount of times, but apparently more than a couple, according to local police. We now are hearing reports that he may, or somebody else who may have been with him, had struggled with the weapon. But we also know that he was shot at a distance of 35 feet away, which really raises questions over how much of a threat this person may have posed.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. I'm going 35 feet away. The kid's reportedly got his hands in the air. What kind of threat are you talking about? I understand. Maybe the cop was just standing his ground, but I don't see from that distance. And then the other part of this is, why do you leave that kid's body laying out there for 4 or 5 hours in the sweltering heat? That, to me, unconscionable.
No, absolutely. And, of course, there are a lot of unanswered questions here, but it looks like the administration is going to be pushing for answers. We actually, within the hour, got a statement from Attorney General Eric Holder saying that both the FBI as well as the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department and the Attorney General's office are going to be having concurrent federal inquiries into this matter, on top of a much larger FBI investigation into this, which is going to be, which is itself actually going to be occurring alongside a local police investigation over what exactly happened here. So hopefully we'll get some answers as this progresses, but for right now there's a lot of unanswered ones that are certainly leading to a great sense of frustration.
And all of these stories, is it just now that we're paying attention to this? Or is this something that's been going on for quite a long time? I gotta be honest. Having grown up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland in a very crime-riddled area, I remember cops being head crackers. They were just as bad, if not worse, than the thugs. And I remember taking this with me my whole life. But we teach our kids, the cops are the good guys. I'm struggling here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I guess just to answer the question, I'm not really sure if there's been, something that's changed. If anything, I think there's probably a dramatic de-escalation in the amount of these situations that have occurred. I can only hope so, considering the societal attitude changes we've had in a while. My knee-jerk reaction would just be to say that, this is probably a sign of sort of a new world we live in terms of the internet and social media, where something like this, a shot young black child, which would typically not end up in cable news, can now gain a lot of attraction from those who would be sort of armchair activists, and then sort of force its way into the public discussion. We know that's sort of what happened with Trayvon Martin. When that initially happened, there was like a good number of weeks that went by before that became a story. But ultimately, the media picked up on it, and then that became sort of a public cause, and ultimately that ended up becoming the dominating story for quite some time.
I mean, to be honest, that's where I found it on Twitter. I didn't see anything on my local news. I didn't see anything on any of the cable news outlets. Not that I was glued to it the entire weekend, but the times I brushed past, I didn't see anything. But it did. It lit up my Twitter account.
No, likewise. That's how I found out about it as well. And I was actually a little bit freaked out how long it took for cable news to really pick up on this.
And I guess
it looks like today they're around to it.
I guess it takes me back to when we were in Wisconsin back in 2011. When the whole occupation was going on, and there was really no mainstream media coverage. Someone had posted a sign saying, "Thank you, CNN, for telling me what's on Twitter."
That's great.
So the riots. The one report I did see in the news are riots. Tons of riots. All these people are uncontrolled and rioting. Is that true?
Well, it does look like there has been sort of a violent aspect to this. I of course am not on the ground, so I'm not going to make any huge judgments one way or another. But we do know, at least with the local media in Missouri, I believe it was the St. Louis Tribune, before anything even happened, were describing those who took to the streets to protest this as mobs of people. They then had to sort of go back and update that to crowds. So I think there's always sort of a vested interest in inflating these acts of violence whenever these situations occur. But then again, I'm not on the ground, so I don't want to be irresponsible and make a general blanket statement.
And I appreciate that. It's always great talking with you, Justin. Thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much.
Our good friend Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
When the going gets tough, Congress gets going. On vacation, that is. They're taking off this entire month and much of September and October, having howled about a host of huge issues, including the humanitarian crisis of immigrant children crossing the U.S.-Mexico border and the growing crisis of our nation's crumbling infrastructure. Congress did nothing, then bolted off the job. Okay, they did do one thing. They filed a frivolous lawsuit against President Obama, charging that he's been governing unilaterally by issuing executive orders. But there are at least three big problems with their suit. One, Obama has issued far fewer executive orders than did George W., his GOP predecessor. Two, they claim that the president defied Congress by inadequately implementing the Obama health care reform. But, hello, Republicans fought that reform tooth and nail and are still trying to stop it from being implemented, meaning they're suing him for not doing something they don't want done. And three, as they departed for vacation, howling House leaders said that in their absence, Obama should deport the suffering, terrorized migrant children who fled to the U.S. this summer. Incredibly, they demanded that, get this, the president should act unilaterally by issuing an executive order. These GOP Congress critters are nutty ideological zealots, but luckily they're also incompetent. Nonetheless, they are clogging the roadway, preventing any of the progress that America desperately needs. As a result, not only is the public fed up with them, but voter turnout is plummeting this year as people see that the hell no faction has turned Democratic participation into a farce. So why bother? This is Jim Hightower saying, it's okay that these right-wingers are killing themselves, but it's not okay that they're also snuffing out America's democracy.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but know they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So it was today. Today was the day back in the year 1884. Charles Hobo Kelly, an unemployed activist of the day, again, with thousands of unemployed people going to Washington, D.C. and saying, do something. And this is one of the things that I love about our current media, that they no historical context whatsoever. With every recession comes a call from we the people for our government to act. So this revisionist history of, well, never in the history of our country did we ever do any of this stuff. The demand was always there. And how did we react? Well, if the conservatives get their way, as we have in the past, as we did on this very day in the year 1884 as federal troops came in and drove the unemployed workers out of Washington, D.C. Two of the soldiers in that body that drove these unemployed workers out of the city, one, a guy named Jack London, you may know the name, famous writer of the time, and very pro-worker, and who would become a legendary labor organizer, Big Bill Haywood. Bill Haywood was, a guy known as, he was, a miner, cowboy, whatever you want to call him, but he was, a big mining organizer. They were the ones, much like, the Bonus Army, when it was Eisenhower and MacArthur who, in 1932, went after the World War I veterans and pushed them out of Washington. Seems it happens a lot, huh? Anyway, Jack London famously, in the aftermath of this, wrote the Scab. Which I've always found interesting. He said after God had finished the rattlesnake, the toad, and the vampire, he had some awful substance left in which he made a scab. A scab is a two-legged animal with a corkscrew soul, a water brain, and a combination backbone of jelly and glue. Where others have hearts, he carries a tumor of rotten principles. When a scab comes down the street, men turn their backs, and angels weep in heaven, and the devil shuts the gates of hell to keep him out. No man or woman has a right to scab as long as there is a pool of water to drown his carcass in, or a rope long enough to hang his body with. Jack London writes, Judas was a gentleman compared with a scab. For betraying his master, he had character enough to hang himself. A scab has not. Esau sold his birthright for a mess of pottage. Judas sold his Savior for 30 pieces of silver. Benedict Arnold sold his country for a promise of a commission in the British Army. The scab sells his birthright, country, his wife, his children, and his fellow man for an unfulfilled promise from his employer. Esau was a traitor to himself. Judas was a traitor to God. Benedict Arnold, a traitor to his country. A scab is a traitor to his God, his country, his family, and his class. Jack London. Thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.